How is everyone? Good morning. We're so honored to, oh man, there's a dog here. That's awesome. We're so honored to have the governor here to come talk to us and for us to be able to ask him questions. That's my intro. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Clint.
How's that for an intro? I think Spencer
Perfect.
Cox has been a wonderful governor. He's great for this community. Please welcome the governor of the state of Utah.
Well, thank you, Clint. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so good to be here with you today. I'm excited to spend a little time with you. Thanks for getting up early and coming out. It's fall turned to winter very quickly, and we know we've got some traffic issues out there that people are struggling with, and we're grateful that Clint was able to make it. It's been, gosh, well, I guess almost 2 years now since I was elected. A little bit over a year and a half since I took office, and we've had some incredible opportunities here in our state over that time, and some challenges as well. And mostly today, what we want to do is I'm doing 8 of these today, all over Utah County, and it's an opportunity to engage, an opportunity to get feedback, an opportunity to answer questions, really an opportunity to hear what is on your mind. We could talk about the good things that are happening in Utah. That's what politicians usually do, is we stand up here and pat ourselves on the back and tell you how great things are, and there's plenty to do with that. I mean there's no question. We've the latest data shows that Utah we had some economists who told us that the 2 best economies right now in the United States are Utah first and Idaho second, and then there's kind of a gap between everyone else. Certainly, we've seen that the latest jobs report shows that there are only about 20 states that have recovered their jobs from the time the pandemic started, which is surprising to a lot of people to think there's still 30 states that have fewer jobs now than they did in March of 2020. But Utah is now almost 7% above where we were when the pandemic started, and that's very positive. I used to think it would be really cool to be the governor with the lowest unemployment in our state's history. Turns out it's not as great as I thought it was going to be. It means more of a challenge for you, for the private sector. It's a challenge for me too, as we're trying to hire people, and we don't have enough people to hire. So that's certainly one of those challenges. Obviously, from an economic standpoint, the entire nation is facing some significant challenges. I don't need to tell you, again, labor being one, but inflation obviously being a big piece of that. Now, there's sadly little that we can do on inflation, with one exception, and it's the thing I worry most about, and that is the price of housing in our state. I'm deeply concerned about the price of housing. It's the thing we're most focused on. We're working very closely with the legislature to figure out what can we do as a state, what levers do we have to pull to increase the supply of housing. Because this is, again, very simply, it's economics 101. It's supply and demand. We have more demand than we have supply. There are 2 things you can do to bring the price of housing down. One is to increase the supply. That's where our focus is. The other thing you can do is to destroy demand, and that's what the Fed is doing by raising interest rates, right? They're artificially destroying demand, and the price of housing is coming down, at least the price you can sell your house for and the price you can buy a house for. We are seeing that start to come down, but that's not a healthy way to bring the price down, and certainly it's not sustainable. But by the way, I'd say again, for the average buyer, while the purchase price of a home is coming down, the monthly amount that they are paying is not coming down because interest rates continue to go up. So that is of course deeply concerning. The other thing that worries me, and I think worries most of you, is water. Certainly, we got some good news. If you look outside over the weekend, those are the best types of storms, and we had a great monsoon season, but that does not help our water storage. Does not help the Great Salt Lake or our reservoirs. We need that in the form of snow, and this was a very wet storm. 2 to 3 inches of water in most of our mountains, which is, for a state that averages about 13 inches of water, getting 3 inches in one storm is great for us. us. I just need 20 more of these over the course of this winter. But we also know that there's so much more that we have to do and can do. And I'm actually less worried. People ask me all the time, are you worried about water? And I say I'm less worried now than I was a year ago. And the reason I'm less worried is well, there are two reasons. One, because you asked me about it, and I get asked about it all the time. That means that you care, that the people of Utah are worried about this. And we needed a real paradigm shift, because we've never had to worry about water since the 1840s and 50s. I mean, those that came before us did such a good job of setting up our water systems that we were the rare arid state that had excess water every year. So we didn't have to put limits on people, and we could price it very low, and so we had to have that paradigm shift. And paradigm shifts don't happen overnight, with one exception, and this is the second reason I'm less worried. We needed a paradigm shift with our legislators, and it was not happening. And I felt like I was beating my head against a brick wall last year, until one morning the Speaker of the House called and said, "Hey, can I borrow a couple Black Hawk helicopters from the National Guard?" And I said, "Sure, what are we doing?" He said, "Well, I want to take legislators on a ride," and they love getting on the Blackhawks. I will just tell you that. Like, it's the one time we can get them all to show up. So they showed up, and he took them on a ride out over the Great Salt Lake. And they came back, and I talked to them as they came off the helicopters, and they all said, "Yeah, it's worse than I thought." There's something about pictures versus like just seeing it in person that is real, and immediately we had about 12 to 13 pieces of legislation that we'd been pushing through, and none of them were moving. And then the next day, all of them moved, and we got all of them passed. And so we completely changed the way we're doing water law in this state. Almost $500 million of funding for water conservation measures, by far the most in our state's history, and probably more than all of our state history combined. And we'll have more this year as well. And just people voluntarily cutting back. It's just remarkable. We save billions and billions of gallons this year because people use less water. It was fun to drive around and see yellow, brown lawns everywhere we went. That was just a real way to show that people were making that sacrifice and doing things differently. So those are the two major issues that we're dealing with. There are lots of others for sure. As a very fast-growing state, there's positives and negatives that come with that. Infrastructure investment is going to be critical in the future, and has been. We've had record infrastructure investment the last 2 years. So 2 years ago, we set the record, and then we broke it again earlier this year with the legislature. And very grateful for their understanding that we have to invest in infrastructure to keep the quality of life high here as we continue to grow, assuming we want our kids and grandkids to live near us and again, not with us. Very important distinction. So those are the things that we're really working on. That's just kind of the message I wanted to share, just to kick things off and get things started. But really today is about you, and whatever you want to talk about. I've got about 40 minutes, and if you don't want to talk that long, that's okay too. Hopefully you got some breakfast. There's lots of things to eat over there. If you haven't, go grab something. But let's go ahead and just open it up. What do you guys want to talk about? Questions, concerns, issues, please.
So you mentioned water is the number 2 issue.
I would say 1A and 1B. Yeah.
I would say for me it's personally number 1.
Yeah.
That's actually led to me telling people maybe now's not a great time to move to Salt Lake because we don't necessarily have the natural resources. When you look at a chart of where that water is going, and you had touched on supply and demand being an issue, the demand is largely for agriculture, and I think one of the bigger touch points is alfalfa, because we're using all of this water for something that's about 2% of our GDP, and then we're sending it to China. How can we justify using a very limited resource in a place like this to send it overseas?
I'm amazed at how many people have become alfalfa experts overnight. It's really fun for me. So I'm grateful that you're suddenly interested in agriculture. I'm guessing you didn't know anything about alfalfa before this past year or two, probably. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Good. So here's the thing you need to know. water is an input for food, period. End of story. Agriculture should be 70 to 80% of the water use in our country. That's where it should go. That's where, again, we should drink it and we should eat it. That's so important for us. Okay, the second thing that's really important is that agriculture has to do more to cut back on their water use. We absolutely agree. Everyone agrees with that, and they are. So the biggest water savings over the past 2 years have been agriculture, and it's not even close. It's not even in the ballpark. Residential cutbacks are a fraction of what agriculture cutbacks have been. The third thing you need to know is that only about 20% of our alfalfa actually goes to China. The rest of it is all domestic. And that goes to, yes, it's only 2% of our GDP, but you have to understand that it's an input for all the other things that we do. So cows eat it, and the milk from those cows, and the beef from those cows. Horses also eat it. It is it is the best crop to be grown at these in this the altitude that we have here. It grows here better than just about anywhere else. It's a really important crop for that. So the last thing you need to know is that most of our water systems are not impacted by the growth of alfalfa, okay? Now, there are some, for sure. But everything south of Utah County does not go into the Great Salt Lake and does not feed into these other systems. You can't just, like, if you put a farmer out of business in Delta, it's not gonna do anything for anyone on the Wasatch Front at all, right? I think it's really important to understand where the water goes and how it's used. So, what do we do? Yes, we need to find crop replacement and better crops that people can use. Technology is the biggest piece of this, and that's what we're doing. So there is technology out there right now where you can grow alfalfa and other crops using significantly less water. So what we've done is we put $70 million into agriculture optimization in the state. And by so doing that, just by upgrading the technology, not changing anything else, this latest round of funding is basically the equivalent of building a new medium-sized reservoir. That's how much water it will be saved by not doing anything else but just upgrading the watering technology that those farmers are using. So my biggest concern right now, actually, and full disclosure, I'm a farmer. We don't make any money on our farm. We lose money every year. I just want to be very clear about this. This idea that we have these kind of fat cat farmers out there sitting on their water reserves is just, it's not real. It's not a thing. My biggest concern right now is that we are losing farmland every year. If you care about the environment, if you care about open space, you should be pro-farmer. You should be all in on agriculture because they are disappearing at an alarming rate. And if you want to know where our water systems came from, farmers. This is what happens every year is farmers sell their land, developers come in, take that water, convert it into residential use. So that's how we get the water that we're using for our families, for our drinking water, for the things that we need. And again, we're losing them. I'm much more concerned about food security. I think everyone should be concerned about food security. I think we learned anything during the pandemic. I don't know if it made you nervous when you went to Costco and you could only buy one of something. Like, that really worries me. And it worries me as a state, it worries me as a nation, because this is happening all across the West. So yes, farmers need to do more, and they are, and they will do their part. Now, we didn't get below 50% in our reservoir systems this year. which is awesome. And that's 2 years in a row with very dire conditions. So we're going to be okay. I mean, you can tell people not to move here. That's probably great. I mean, there are a lot of people that wish that we would stop telling people to move here. But we're going to be okay when it comes to our water over the next decade plus. And again, because of the changes that we're implementing now, I'm just far less concerned about it than I was a year ago. I really believe in our ability to deal with these problems, to innovate, and to make the changes that are necessary. We faced challenges before, and we always underestimate our ability to adapt to change and our ability to innovate. And Utahns are proving once again that they can do that. At the first of this year, when we looked at our water supply, I was told by every expert that there is no way we wouldn't get far below 50% in our water storage. It was just impossible, and it was going to be far worse than last year. And yet here we are at the end of the water year, and we're actually better off than we were last year. Why? Because farmers, residents, people just said, okay, we don't need to use all of this. The bigger problem we have is unnecessary lawns. Because you know what? There is zero economic benefit for lawns. Nobody eats it. Nobody grows their food on it. Nobody walks on it. If you have lawns or grass anywhere in the state, and the only time anyone walks on it is to mow it, that is a colossal waste of water, and it's significant. It's very significant. That's where we have to have a real mindset change, and it's starting to happen. We had some municipalities that wouldn't allow you. It was against the law to use water-wise landscaping. You had to put in ornamental grass. Now, we've changed that. We've made it illegal to prohibit it. We had HOAs that did the same thing. We are working on some serious water reuse plans in southern Utah. This is going to be really important for St. George, Washington County. We know that a Lake Powell pipeline, because of the health of the Colorado River system, is not going to be built anytime soon. So we have to start focusing, again, on innovation, on the technology that is out there. We had a wonderful trip, several of us. We brought legislators with us. We went to Dubai and Israel. Those are places that have figured out how to do more with less. There are some important lessons that we can learn from them. And so I'm very excited about the future and where we go. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to put farmers out of business. I'm just not. If you want a governor that does that, find another governor, because I'm not going to do it. Other questions?
So, go back 40 years, we have the birth of Nobel, Word Perfect. I'll try again. Go back 40 years, Governor, we have the birth of Nobel, Word Perfect, Evans and Sutherland. And since then, it's just been insane to watch the growth of the technology industry here in Utah. Is there a similar industry out there that might be poised for a breakout like the tech industry?
Yeah, thank you. It is incredible to see what's happened. I mean, just this, right? Everywhere we go, and we hear about it everywhere we go. As we talk about it, and Dan Hemmert's here with me. Some of you know Dan, Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity back there. He leads these efforts for our team. And to me, it's life sciences. There's no question in my mind that the life science industry is that kind of next Silicon Slopes, maybe where Silicon Slopes was 10 years ago. And I feel pretty passionate about this. We've seen there are examples of companies that have really broken out here in Utah. I was back in San Francisco a few months ago, meeting with companies, life science companies, and they all said that Utah is on their radar. Obviously Silicon Valley has been big in life sciences. Boston and that area area has had an explosion in the life sciences, but Utah is not far behind, and all eyes are kind of there. We're working with legislators as well to make sure that Utah's ecosystem is aligned in a way that will encourage that type of growth. And the best part, the deep tech sectors here, like these are really good jobs, right? Jobs that pay a lot. They're jobs that are sticky here. We're looking more at on the manufacturing side as well. There are some drug manufacturers that are looking at doing more here in this state. These biotech firms that we're working with, we were just last week, we were up at the University of Utah that has been very successful in spinning off some of these biotech companies. And we're again trying to align better so that our system of higher ed, and we have an amazing system of higher ed here, but that we are taking advantage of those new technologies and the research that's happening here, being able to spin those out to make them viable companies, and then the infrastructure investment that is coming into Utah. I'm just telling you, like, I've never been more excited about the future of healthcare, because and Utah's involved in all of these. I mean, the drugs that are coming, the treatments that are coming for cancer, I mean, they're already here, that are coming for diabetes, coming for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It's remarkable. I mean, we're about to enter the golden age of medicine, healthcare, therapeutics, and Utah's going to play a big role in that. So I'm super excited about what we're seeing there. They kind of have their Silicon Slopes biohive that is trying to follow the model, and I know Clint's had lots of conversations with Caitlin and those guys, and we're really excited about that. The only other, I mean, and these are already kind of mature industries, but the financial services and kind of the fintech side of things. Again, there's a tech component to all of these, right? Silicon Slopes has its fingers in all of this. But I'm really excited about what's happening in fintech, and the University of Utah is going to be doing some cool announcements around fintech, and then defense and aerospace is already huge, and it's the one kind of piece of industry that nobody really talks about, but it is very mature and growing. Northrop Grumman, the project they're doing out there, it's like a $4 billion investment in the state. It's the largest economic development project in our state's history. They're building the new Minuteman missile, the replacement, the third leg of the triad, and it's all happening right here. Like, I mean, that company alone could hire every engineer from every Utah college and university every year for the next several years, and that's how big the Northrop Grumman piece is. Great question. Please.
So one of the base needs for the tech industry here is stable baseload power.
Yes.
And with the growing Utah, and also incorporating into that growth of electric cars, we're going to have to grow our electric infrastructure by 1/3 to 1/2. What are we doing to address that? Because, okay, snow, Utah, synonymous, right?
Yep.
When that happens, solar power doesn't cut it.
Yep.
Wind power, okay, we have whole months without wind in Utah. So the only baseload stable power is nuclear.
Yes.
What are we doing to address that?
So thank you for saying baseload power. I think most people don't understand the difference and how critical this is. And when I say most people, I mean like the president and his cabinet. I mean that very sincerely. It's incredibly frustrating. I had a call with Administrator Regan from the EPA a couple weeks ago. We have coal-fired power plants here that are scheduled to go out offline in the 30s and 40s in 2036 and 2042. There's an effort to shut them down in the next 4 years, and um, you can do that, and 2 million people will be at risk for losing power. If that happens, and we have a summer like we had now, we would have had 2 million people with blackouts. It makes absolutely no sense. Now, I am a huge proponent of energy sources that do not emit carbon. I believe in that. But this has to be sequenced. It has to be done the right way. And you have to have that baseload power, which is missing. Now, natural gas is the cleanest baseload that we have available to us right now. And we should be investing more in natural gas for sure. If you care about the environment and you won't talk about nuclear, then I can't take you seriously. Nuclear is the answer if we want to decarbonize our emissions and have stable, cheap baseload power. It absolutely has to be part of the discussion. So what are we doing? Well, we're working with our electricity provider, Rocky Mountain Power. They're also working with, again, heavily regulated. The federal government doesn't permit nuclear anymore. We haven't for 50 years. But they are working on a project. It's a small nuclear project right on the border of Utah and Wyoming. So it's in Kemmerer, Wyoming, right on the border. The hope is that they will do many of those here in the state of Utah as well. Some new science coming out of BYU. Smaller reactors that use less water, that type of innovation is happening. We're all in. We're very supportive. We're working with the National Lab in Idaho on more nuclear, figuring out how we can get that and how we can get it out there very quickly. But that's not all. We've got a huge geothermal project we're working on called Forge down in south central Utah, working with the governor of Colorado on geothermal and hydrogen as well. I'm partnering with Governor of Wyoming, Governor of Idaho, and Governor of New Mexico, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. There's some federal funding that's available to explore greater hydrogen options, and so we're looking at hydrogen as well. And we're all in on all of those technologies, but we have to do it the right way. You can't take baseload offline. California's learning that. Germany's learning that. They're killing their nuclear plants and suddenly deciding that's a bad idea. Bringing them back online, and sadly, I mean, we're seeing more coal plants across the Europe and Asia, because you've got to have that stable baseload. So I appreciate you asking the question, and I just wish that more people understood the difference and how important that is. And as energy gets more expensive because we take off these cheaper energy sources, it only hurts those who struggle, are most vulnerable, the poorest among us. And so we can do both. We can be smart about this. We can decrease emissions, bring down global emissions, and make sure that people have enough power. I'm just going to add another piece of that because you brought it up. It's not just the power piece. You mentioned electric vehicles, electric energy. We have a permitting problem in this country. It takes 8 to 12 years just to get the permits to build transmission lines, right? So even if you have the power to be able to electrify the grid in a way that we want, and I think most of us, if not all of us, agree that electric vehicles are amazing. They're the future. They're better for our air quality. They're better for everything. But they don't work if you don't have the infrastructure. And you can't take 8 to 12 years to permit a new power line to be able to make that happen. And I'll go one step further. How do you think we build these things? There's critical minerals involved in all of this. We have those critical minerals here in the state of Utah. 28 of the 34 critical minerals that are listed as critical by the United States are found right here in the state of Utah. The problem is we can't get to any of them. So we're reliant on China, Africa, mines owned by China, who are not our friends, to get the minerals that we need. I'm sitting in a meeting in February with the Secretary of Energy and the Secretary of the Interior over public lands. And the Secretary of Energy is saying all the right things. We have to do better. We have to mine more here. By the way, it's cleaner for the environment when we do it here than when they do it in Africa or China. And she's saying, we need more of this. We got to do more here, and we're going to incentivize it. We're going to give out more money to incentivize more mining here in the United States. And I'm just dying here. And I said, Madam Secretary, I love what you're saying, and I agree. I agree with everything you're saying, but here's the problem. We don't need more incentives. The incentives are there. Like, we have companies that are willing to mine this stuff, the market's there, we can do all of this. But the person sitting next to you, the Secretary of Interior, won't allow any of that to happen. They won't issue the permits. There's none of that. I need you to talk to you. We don't need more money. Like, we just need you to say yes and issue the permits so that we can do these types of things. It's very frustrating. If you want electric vehicles, if you want to decarbonize the power grid in this country, you actually have to do some of this stuff. And if you're not willing to, then we're going to end up in the same spot. Very frustrating. Thank you. Other questions? I feel like such a downer. Let's go here. Yes.
So I live in Salt Lake City. Homelessness is sucking up a lot of the political oxygen. It seems like everybody agrees to some extent that mental health is more of a problem than maybe finances or even housing costs. So a lot of adults in Salt Lake City with mental health needs, it seems like the resources aren't there. And then, moving that down, what sorts of, what role does the state have to play in providing mental health resources for adults and for kids?
Yeah, huge issue, important question. And the answer is more of a role than we've played historically. So if you follow local government and the way governments have aligned, not just in Utah but nationally, mental health services have always been at the county level. So counties are responsible. So we all have kind of our county. So sometimes counties get together with our Association of Governments to provide these services, and that's where it's been left. So about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I went to Governor Herbert and I said, Governor Herbert, I'm looking at these numbers, our suicide rates, mental health rates. We just have to do more. So he let me put together what we call the Governor's Suicide Prevention Task Force. And we brought together legislators and people from the private sector, healthcare providers, mental health providers, and we all came together and we started to look at the system. And I want you to think of this system, and I'll address homelessness specifically in just a second. But think of it kind of as a funnel. If we're going to kind of model this out. So the funnel. The funnel represents two things. So first of all, human beings and our mental health needs. So at the top of the funnel, where it's the widest, the most people. You have these are kind of your less acute mental health needs. So maybe at the top we have loneliness, right? We have mild depression and anxiety. So nothing too severe. Probably all of us have suffered from that at some time, and then the funnel also represents the services that we have available. So at the top, you need lots of people to provide those services, but they're not that serious. And so now here's the other thing. So then you go down, and at the bottom of the funnel, let's say you have like inpatient needs. So this is like the state hospital where you have psychiatric beds, right? Or mental health facilities. Fewer people need those. They're very expensive, and so the question is, do we have the right alignment of services for the people? And here's the thing: if you can get to people at the top of the funnel, you can actually prevent them from getting down to the bottom of the funnel, where it's much more expensive and harder to take care of. And what we found was that there were serious gaps and misalignments all along the way. So what you don't need at the top of the funnel are psychiatrists, right? You don't need clinical psychologists or psychiatrists to deal with loneliness. You can have like mentors and people with just a little bit of training. You can have students at universities who are maybe getting a psychology degree who can work with that group at the top of the funnel. And so one of the things that we put in place was the Safe UT app. So it's this idea that anyone, any student, and we're rolling it out to more adults all the time, can push a button and immediately be in contact with a mental health professional. Doesn't mean they're a clinical psychologist, but it's somebody who can deal with what you're dealing with and can help you. And it's had enormous success. Now, as you go down the funnel, there were a couple other things missing. One is, so if you think of this as kind of physical health, right? We have hospitals and emergency rooms, and then you have a doctor's office. But for a long time in Utah, we didn't have something. If your child woke up at 2 a.m. with a fever and you were worried, for a long time, your only choice was to go to an emergency room. And that was poorly aligned, right? Because emergency rooms are very expensive. Your child wasn't really having an emergency. It's just that the doctor's office isn't open at 2 a.m. So what did we do? Well, we created urgent care. Right? So a place where you could go 24 hours a day, anytime, and you could take your child to see a doctor and not pay the same rates that you would pay to go to an emergency room. We didn't have anything like that for mental health care. And so what have we end up doing? Well, if someone had a psychotic episode or a mental health crisis, usually you didn't know what to do, so you call 911. We would send an ambulance and a fire truck and a police officer, none of whom were trained to deal with mental health issues. And then they would usually take you either to jail or to an emergency room, right? Two other places that were not, that were never designed to solve these problems. It was very expensive, and it usually made the problem worse, whatever it was. So what we did was we put a significant investment into 2 new areas. One, we call them MCOTs, Mobile Crisis Outreach Teams. So now in most places, we're getting more of these in rural Utah. If you call 911 because there's a mental health episode, instead of sending an ambulance and a police car, we send a nondescript van with 2 professionals who can come and help with the situation, and they're mental health professionals. Now, the other thing we're doing is we're building across the state. I think we have 1 that's open. We've got, I think, 4 more under construction, and we would like to do many more. But these are those urgent cares. We call them receiving centers. They will be open 24 hours a day. You can go in. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you do have insurance, they will take your insurance and try to recover for it so that we can help pay for this. But you can take a child in, a parent in. You can walk in off the street and get help. We have one in Davis County. It's had an enormous improvements in outcomes. Police officers, if they pick someone up, instead of taking them to jail, they go and take them there first. And it saves them time, and people are actually getting help. So we're very excited about that. Those are all things that are in the works. Utah is now spending more as a state on mental health care than ever before, which I think is a good thing. When it comes to homelessness, and you are absolutely right. We are seeing, as a fast-growing state, we are seeing more and more people who are experiencing homelessness. A few years ago, I went and stayed at a homeless shelter. Just didn't tell anybody, just dressed the part, went, stayed there, talked to people all night, tried to understand what's happening out there. And the data is pretty clear that mental health and addiction is a huge part of our homeless population. A lot of interesting theories that go back to where, back in the 40s and 50s, we had a lot of people suffering from mental health, and we put them in institutions. And then and there were so many problems, and rightly so, we deinstitutionalized our mental health system. But many of those people just now are on the street, and that it's deeply troubling. Same problem was happening with homelessness. There were lots of people, so counties played a major role, cities played a major role. We had nonprofit service providers playing a role, but there was no alignment. There was nobody in charge. There was nobody making sure that all of these systems were working together. And so a year ago, I appointed, it's a brand new position, it's a homeless service coordinator position for the state, at the state level, who is part of my cabinet, who reports to me as a senior advisor, and who works to align all of those systems. And he has spent the last year everywhere, trying to drill down and figure out what's working and what's not working. Now, over the next couple of weeks, he's going to be putting out his proposal on how we can better align these systems, get more people help. The other problem we have with homelessness is that we just kind of talk about it as if it's a thing, like all those experiencing homelessness are the same, and they're very not. It's also very much, you know, kind of like that funnel proposition, in that there are layers to this. You have people who are ready for housing right now, and if we can just get them housing, they'll be better off. So we are investing $55 million in deeply affordable housing. You may have heard that Salt Lake City recently approved a tiny home community that we're putting together. This is to get those people who are ready for housing with services into those houses. Not everyone is ready for that right now. And that's a misnomer. There are people who just want to be out camping. They want to be left alone. They want to camp on the street. They don't want anything to do. You can give them a house, and the next day they will be right out where they were. So the second piece of this, so below housing, is we have these resource centers. We used to call them shelters. They're better than shelters now because we have services there. So as people go in there, they are meeting with counselors. They are meeting with people who can help them with addiction, who can help them with mental health, who can help them get a job, all of the things. And there are people that are ready for that, right? So that's kind of that next phase. And then there are people who aren't ready for that. We take them to the shelter, we give them food, we give them a bed, we give them all of these resources, and the next day they're right back out on the street, right? So how do we help those people? That's the piece that we're working on now. What does that look like? Because what we can't do is we can't have them just living in squalor, camping wherever, doing drugs on people's front lawns, and you can't do that either. So what does that piece look like? And that's what we're working through right now, and hope to have some announcements in the next couple weeks. Sorry, it's a really long answer, but I think it's an important answer to understand that if you had asked 6 years ago, what role does the state play in homelessness and mental health, I would have said we don't play a role. And every politician would have said that. And I don't believe that anymore. I believe the state has a major role to play in both of those things, and we're trying to play an increased role. Thank you. Please.
Hi, Governor. With the deficits that were exposed in our public education system. Oh, thank you. Yeah. During COVID, some of the deficits in our public school system were exposed, showing the need for more options in education. Would you veto a school choice bill that gives Utah families more options?
So you're right, and let me talk about a couple things. There was some data that just came out, and we knew this. There's no question that kids need in-person learning, and that in-person learning is absolutely critical. An article that came out in the Wall Street Journal this morning, I think, that talked about what we're seeing with a significant decline across the country in testing scores, specifically around math, significant decrease there. I would note, I'm not bragging because it's such a low bar, but Utah was the only state that did not see a significant decline in a statistically significant decline, I think is the way the Wall Street Journal put it, in math test scores. Now, again, very low bar, and we have a long ways to go, but part of that is because of the sacrifice of students and families and teachers and administrators to get kids back in school before the rest of the country, and we're seeing the results of that, a very positive result. Now, you ask a specific question about other options. And I've been very clear about this. I am pro-school choice, and I want families to have other options. We have the lowest funding per pupil in the nation, right? I'm not willing to take money away from public schools to fund that unless we see a major increase in teacher pay. If the legislature is willing to give a major increase in teacher pay this year, then I would absolutely sign that bill, because I want to sign that bill. I want that to happen. So we can do both of those things this year, and I feel confident we can get it done.
And also, just on a side note, is Taylor Swift paying you to tweet
She
her
is
new album?
not.
Okay.
I wish she was. That would be great. So I have to say just something fun about that. So I have a 15-year-old daughter. And when you try to connect with a 15-year-old, some of you know what that's like. Music is the one thing my daughter and I can connect on. And so several years ago, she made me listen to Taylor Swift as we were traveling around the state. And so that's the one thing she and I can connect on. And so we stayed up till midnight on the East Coast to listen to Taylor's new album, and we had a lot of fun that night. So thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
So with the rise of inflation and government depleting gas reserves as well as supply chain shortages, there's rumors of supply and even food shortages in the future, and you mentioned food scarcity being an issue. What is the state of Utah doing to help combat these shortages and make sure that we're prepared in the event that we aren't able to get the supplies that we need?
So supply chain issues have been a problem now, since the beginning of the pandemic, right? And China has been at the center of many of those supply chain issues. There's a couple things we're doing. One is we have to make sure that our financial house is in order. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we have more reserves now than at any time in our state's history. Our rainy day fund is higher than it's ever been. We have an education rainy day fund that is fairly new, so that if there is a deep recession of some sort, and again, it's not just me saying this, economists have said that Utah is the best prepared state for any type of downturn in the economy. So making sure that whenever these downturns happen, there are winners and losers, and I believe that Utah is well positioned to be a winner. We did it during the pandemic. We came out stronger than other states. We've been able to take advantage of those downturns in ways that are beneficial. From a supply chain issue, what we're trying to do is to help reshore more of those supply chains. And so there are two things. So one, we pushed hard to get some financial help for companies that wanted to bring advanced manufacturing or expand advanced manufacturing here in Utah. It was very successful. We're hoping that we can get more from the legislature this year, because we can go back and prove that the money that they gave us led to a significant increase in manufacturing here in Utah, which is very good. Now, we know not all of those jobs and all that manufacturing can come to Utah. So the other thing that we're doing is working very closely with our friends to the south in Mexico, because we believe that Mexico is very well positioned to take a large portion of those manufacturing jobs that are leaving China, and let's bring them back. That helps us in a couple ways. One, it's nearshoring. It's obviously closer to us. We obviously have a better relationship with Mexico than we have with China right now. And as Mexico's economy improves, that helps with the immigration crisis and some of the issues that we're seeing at the border. So we want Mexico to be successful, and they are better positioned for some of those manufacturing jobs than we are here in the United States. I mentioned before we have a labor crisis here, and so helping them. We were down in Mexico in this spring with Utah companies who are looking to expand there, as well as Mexican companies that are looking to expand here in the state of Utah. It was incredibly successful. We'll be heading back next year as well, and then the last piece is just the food security piece, and we do that by making sure that we have healthy, thriving agriculture community here in our state.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question. Okay, Please.
Me?
Yes, you get the last word.
Great, thank you. And thank you for your presentation and taking time today. But I was hoping you could maybe address some of the issues with gender equality and gender wage gap in Utah. I mean, I'm sure you see the surveys that typically places Utah last in the country.
Yeah, it's something I'm deeply concerned about, and thank you for asking. I think we have to be intentional about this. I really do, and we have some groups that are working on this across the state. One way to be intentional about it is that as governor, I have over 20,000 employees in this state, and so I'm part of the workforce, and I want to make sure that I'm also not part of the problem. And so one of the very first things we did a wage gap study here for state government, just for state government. And there were a couple things that came out of that. One, I was very pleased to see that we did not generally have a wage gap in state government. I'm not talking about the state of Utah, just in state government. However, we did have some wage gaps in certain departments, in certain areas. So we fixed those. I've been intentional about, I have lots of appointments and making sure that we are looking for the very best people. And often those best people are women, but they're not being included in the search process for different reasons. Not intentional, unintentionally, but so we're being intentional about that. I can tell you that in the governor's office, my own office, we now have more women than men. And again, that was not intentional, that we need to have more women than men. It's we need to find the best people, and those were the best people. We also now have, for the first time in our state's history, we have a majority of women on the Supreme Court. As I had 2 of those picks, they're incredible. They were the best candidates by far. But again, we have to be looking. Now, another thing we're doing. So we had some of you know Dr. Susan Madsen. This is her area of emphasis. She used to be at UVU. She's now at Utah State. We've had her come in and break down some of those, like the Wallet Hub survey that has us last, and looked at every single category so that we can actually have a strategy around every one of those categories to help bring that up. And that's exactly what we're working on. Look, Utah is different, and it's always going to be different. But this is the point I want to end with. And we have several bills that we're going to be pushing. We'll see how far that they get this year. My Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson, is incredible, and she's really helping on this issue. But I want every woman in Utah to be able to have a choice, a real choice. And that choice is, if they want to work, then they should be able to make as much as any man out there for the same skills and the same services they're providing. And 2, if they don't want to work, and they want to stay home and raise their families, like my wife chose to do, that they have that option as well. Far too often what is happening is there are women who want to stay home but can't because economically it's not possible for them. Conversely, there are women who want to work but can't, or are being treated unfairly because of the wage gap issue. And so we can fix both of those things. I believe that childcare is really important, and it's something we need to look at more. Again, women who want to work but can't because they can't afford childcare, right? That's not a true option if you don't have the ability to do that. Making sure that if we're truly a family-friendly state and our birth rates are falling here, that we put more of an emphasis on supporting families. And one way we do that is with maternity leave. If you want to have a child, when I became lieutenant governor, the state of Utah had 0 maternity leave, right? None. That makes no sense to me. Like, we should be supporting mothers and children and fathers and children. So I begged the legislature. I got 3 weeks. Still not enough. We can do more there. I created just a couple months ago, the first of its kind in our state, an Office of Family. And we are focused on improving the health of our families, because that is the most important institution in our state, in our nation, in our world. All of the problems that we see most of the problems that we see extend from families that have dysfunction and fail. When you see kids failing out of school, when you see kids that are, the incarceration rates, our homelessness rates, if we can help at the family level, we can avoid so many of those issues, and that's what we're trying to do. I'm out of time. Thank you so much. I know you're busy people. You have amazing things happening. I just want to conclude with this. I honestly believe that we live in the best state in the nation at the best time in the history of the world. I know there's a lot of bad stuff out there. I know it's easy to get trapped in the negativity. I know it's a toxic environment out there. But I believe that the exhausted majority is still bigger than the extremes. And you all have a chance to vote. Please vote. I hope you vote for members of my party, but if you don't, I hope you vote. I really believe that is the baseline participation. That if we want our state and our country to succeed, we need more people to get involved and get involved in the right ways, in ways that build, not ways that tear down. Thank you for what you're doing to build. Clint, thanks for having me. Keep up the good work, and may God bless all of you. Thank you.